Okay guys, we're going to work through this problem set. First thing we're going to start on is question 1, part A. So the first thing you have to do is get the parent genotypes. So the female would be little a, big B, and the male would be big A, little b, little b. When you do a dihybrid Punnett square of this or your probability rules, then you will get that all of your offspring will be hybrids. All of your offspring will be heterozygous. They'll be big A, big B, little b. So then you're going to take an F1 female, so just one of these offspring, and you are going to cross her with a true breeding black wingless male. When this is saying true breeding, that means that the whichever fly that we're looking at is going to be homozygous for whatever trait it is we're talking about. So because of that, we can figure out that the male genotype for this is going to be little a, little b, little b. Now we're moving on to part D. So if we look at part D, then we see that we count 1,600 offspring in this generation from crossing the F1 with this male here. We are going to go through and do that cross, assuming, because it tells us right here, that 0 recombination happens. So if these traits are 100% linked, I am going to first, let's draw them out. So I'm just going to draw, those are our pretend chromosomes. The reason why I know that these are going where they're going, our dominant versus our recessive, is you have to go all the way back to your very first set. You have to go all the way back to your parent types. So if you're confused as to how I know there's a big A, little b on one and a little a, big B on another, go back to your parents and do the same thing, and it will give you the result. So now what we have to do is we are going to cross these two individuals. Think about when you cross two individuals, you have to take half of the genetic information from one, half of the genetic information from another. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to take one chromosome from the mom. In this case, I'll just choose this left one right here. Then I'm going to take one chromosome from the dad. So the genotype would be little a, big B, little b. But we took into consideration this chromosome, but what if the offspring inherits this chromosome? So we're also going to do that one. So one chromosome from mom, one chromosome from dad. This genotype would be big A, little b, little b. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go over here and we are going to find what we would expect to count. So there is a 50% chance of getting either of these genotypes. Now I'm just going to go in and I'm going to find the genotype. So those two that I just underlined, that is what we would consider the offspring that we're expecting to get. And we should see a 50-50 split. It is not possible according to this problem because we assumed no recombination happened and that the traits are linked. So we should not be able to have any recombination of that genetic material. But if we keep going, if we move on to part E, it tells us that when we count that F2 generation, we observe instead these numbers. So these were the, just to make sure you're following along, those were the two offspring that resemble the parents genetically. How did we get 85 and 75? We had some sort of recombination happening. That's why it's called figuring out the recombination frequency. So these are our two numbers that we are using for our recombination frequency because we did not expect to get 85 and 75 of those genotypes. Then we divide it by the total, which is 1600, multiply by 100, and that should give us That gives us 10. You can call it 10%, 10 map units, 10 centimorgans, whatever it is that you need, or whatever it is that you refer to. So then in part F, we are looking at another set of traits. We see that antenna length and wing size are 5% or 5 map units apart. So this part F is want us to make a possible map of these 3 different traits. So first thing I'm going to do, just because it was the first thing that I calculated, I am going to calculate the distance between the color and the wings. You just calculated that it was 10%. Now this problem right here tells me the distance between wings and antenna length is 5. So I'm just going to do the distance between wing and antenna length is 5. Now there is another way that I could draw out this map. I could also make it to where I had the distance between wings and antenna as 5. And then if we were to measure the distance between color and wings is 10. Moving on. Now we're on question number 2. So if we're looking at question number 2, now we're looking again at color and something to do with the wings. So part A is having us, first thing we need to do is figure out what the parents are. So one parent would be little b, big D. Big D, remember it said they were true breeding. That's how we know that they're homozygous for those traits. When you cross these individuals, this is the dihybrid Punnett square that you should get if you do it correctly. I'm not going to work through that. But if we go through and you have to figure out the phenotypes. If we go through and find the phenotypes, the expected ratio should be 9:3 to 3:1. But the actual data is shown right here in this table, and that doesn't, it's not 9:3 to 3:1 ratio, but it's not 100% perfect. So we're going to do some further investigation. If we do some more investigating, we are also going to do a couple more test crosses, and the 2 parents, we were told that we are going to cross, that's a B, we're going to cross one from who is heterozygous with a homozygous recessive. So draw out your chromosomes. Again, we know that the big B is on this chromosome instead of this chromosome because we trace it all the way back to those original parents. If I'm getting the offspring from this cross right here, I have to take half the genetic information from one parent, half the genetic information from another parent. If we have 0 recombination happen, then one possible offspring option would be this. So big B, little d, little d. But what if I inherit this chromosome? So let's draw that as well. if we find what the phenotype of these two offspring right here, that would be red crinkled and yellow smooth. So if we have 0 recombination happening, we are not recombining any of this genetic information, then we would expect to just find only yellow smooth and only red crinkled, but we don't. Instead, we also find these genotypes with the phenotype of red smooth and yellow crinkled. So those are our recombinant numbers. We are going to calculate the recombination frequency. So it should come out to 20%. We're taking the total number of recombinants and dividing it by the total number of offspring. So we get 20% on that. Now you decide to turn your attention to a different gene. So I'm just moving on down this problem. You decide to bring your attention to a different gene. This one is controlling wing length. So we're going to use a big L and a little l. If we are figuring out the genotypes of our first parents, then we could write it right here. Big B, little l, and then little b, big L, big L. When you cross those together, all of your F1 offspring are going to be big B, big L, little l. So now, if we're going on to part B, we are going to do exactly what we've done with the previous problems. So now we are taking, so I'm just figuring out what parents it's telling me to use. This is telling me to use a parent from that F1 generation and cross it with a homozygous recessive parent. All right, so I'm going to figure out what my possible offspring are, taking one set of genes from one set of genes from the other parent. What if I were to inherit the other chromosome? So these are the two possible genotypes that I expect to get. Figure out what their phenotypes are. You're welcome to pause it if you need to. These are the phenotypes of the offspring that I was expecting. So that would make those two numbers our recombinant numbers. So I would just do 45 plus 55 divided by 1,000, the total number of all of the offspring, multiply it by 100, you should get 10%. So the very last thing that we're going to do is we are going to make our chromosome map. So we're looking at body color, we are looking at wing length, and we are looking at wing surface. We calculated all of our possibilities. You guys just told me up in this problem that the distance between body and wing length is 10. And then in the previous part on question 2, you told me that the distance between body and wing surface was 20. So make sure those numbers line up. They do. But there is another way that we could draw this. We could also draw our chromosome like this. I hope this video helped you make a little bit more sense on how to solve these problems.